Hey, what's going on guys, it's Sealzy and welcome back to a brand new video on the channel, and today we're talking about a hotly contested debate of which show is better, Breaking Bad or The Sopranos. Now this debate is pretty much everywhere online and no one can give me a straight answer. Some people say The Sopranos is the best and other people say Breaking Bad is the best, but today we'll figure out which is better, the gabagool or the chili pea, yo. But before I get more into this video, I just want to say that both of these TV shows get the seal of approval of being absolutely peak. I'm not going to say these shows are overrated or underrated, they are both perfectly rated. They can both go down as top 5 shows of all time, let me just get that straight. So without further ado, let's get into the video and talk about The Sopranos first. By the way, massive spoilers for both shows, and I'm going to go with the assumption that you've watched both of these shows, so I'm not going to explain too many plot points, so let's get into it. It's the year 1999. It's the turn of the century, antidepressants become popular and arguably overprescribed, global terrorism's on the rise, which I'm sure won't affect anything later, and the caring, loyal husband and father and reform rabbi minister Bill Clinton is president hot off the scandal of cheating on his wife with Monica Lewinsky. What a year to be alive, and oh, it was a great year. Because since the universe had to atone for its sins of giving us the most big shit can sloppy shit of all time, Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, it gave us a gem that revolutionized TV as we know it, The Sopranos. And it cannot be understated how important this show was for television. Firstly, to me and a lot of other people, it started the golden age of premium TV, and it allowed TV to be taken more seriously by critics as it rivaled movies in its quality. But secondly, it made it accepted and popular to make a main character of a TV show morally ambiguous. Morally ambiguous leads in movies was already a very popular thing at the time, but not for TV shows, because the common thought was that you'd want the lead to be a good guy. You want the people to have someone to cheer for, and that would be the lead, of course. And it would usually be, the good guys win, the bad guys lose. They run into a problem, they figure it out, and the bad guys lose. That was a common thing with, especially older TV. So it was definitely the safer play to make your lead of a TV show a good guy so people can actually root for them and love them. So it was definitely a big gamble and risk for The Sopranos to make the decision of having a morally ambiguous character who has some pretty fucking villainous tendencies, let's just say that. So without The Sopranos, I don't think shows like Breaking Bad, Game of Thrones, Sons of Anarchy, Mad Men, The Boys, none of those shows would exist, and a lot more I'm not mentioning right now. So The Sopranos did a lot for TV as a whole, but how was the quality of the show? I mean, where do I even begin? I guess I can just start with The Sopranos has some of the most brilliant writing I've ever seen from fiction, especially when it comes from a character and dialogue perspective. The characters just feel so real and authentic, and all the dynamics work out really well. I really feel like the Soprano family is really a family. And even though Tony Soprano is a mob boss who literally fucking kills people, I can still relate to him with his family drama issues. And the interactions between these characters always feel genuine and real, because every piece of dialogue matters, even down to the last minute detail. Except for these moments.
Ace, I flush. No, he's fucking more!
What the prick's place we sort of got? Never mind, I need a drink.
And that's because its biggest strength is character writing. Hell, it's literally about a mob boss talking to a psychiatrist and talking about his feelings. So you would think its biggest strength is character writing. I would say possibly better than any other show, but who am I? Because at this show's core, it's secondarily a late 90s and early 2000s commentary, but primarily it's a character study about a deeply flawed man like Tony Soprano, trying to toe the line between family man and mob boss. A man trying to be a good father and husband, even though he routinely kills people including his friends, lies, steals, and cheats on his wife more times than I can count, but even through all of that, you somehow get to see glimpses of kindness and humanity from him. And it makes you question naively if he can possibly be a good person until he does something completely heinous in classic Tony Soprano fashion. And that's what makes the show so great. Tony and most of the cast are such complex characters, and it makes them feel so real, and that's what makes the show so addicting to watch. And it's evident The Sopranos is a character-based show because most of the best moments in the show are just characters having conversations with each other. Some of the best lines in the show is Tony's therapy sessions, but even when people die and there's quote-unquote action, it's not cinematic. It's raw, brutal, and sometimes feels sudden. So after all that glazing for The Sopranos, let's get into some of the downsides, which are not many, but in this hotly contested debate, everything matters. Now some of these are going to be nitpicks, but like I said, everything matters. And firstly, the cinematography is not the best, and sometimes it's played safe. Like a lot of the times, it's really not that inventive or crazy, and most of it is pretty bland. Although there are some pretty iconic Sopranos shots, and there are some pretty beautiful shots, but they're very few and far between in the show. And especially when you compare it to a show like Breaking Bad, which I'll talk about later, it's really evident how bland the Sopranos cinematography can be. Also, another nitpick, but the editing in this show is not the best. I remember watching the show a lot of the times and really scratching my head at some of the editing decisions.
All the best.
Like sometimes it will just like fade to black randomly, or it'll fade in really weird, or it'll, like a scene will just stop really randomly. There's just some weird editing decisions throughout this series, and I think some of it is because of age. And I would say also the same thing with the cinematography. I think the cinematography and the editing are kind of due to how old the TV show is. Another critique is that since this show is so character focused and character based, it can definitely get a little slow at times, and it definitely drags its feet at certain times throughout the show. And I don't really mind it while watching it, but it's definitely noticeable sometimes. And once again, I don't really care, but I could definitely see what other people would care, and they would see an issue with that. So that's another minor critique. But finally, my biggest issue with The Sopranos is the formulaic structure of the seasons. Anyone who's watched all of The Sopranos already knows this, but in pretty much every single season, there's some like guy who comes in at the beginning. He challenges Tony. Tony has to figure out how to deal with this because he's connected with other people in the show. He deals with his family, deals with the people in his crew. He has to figure out how to deal with it, and usually they die at the end. It happens in pretty much every single season. I'm pretty sure it happens in every single season, actually. So it makes it to where you can pretty much like guess what's gonna happen, and it loses a lot of the edge it could have. It makes the show predictable at times, but I think this formula just served as a template for Tony's character study, because if you give him a problem, it's a lot easier to delve into the deep ways of how he thinks and behaves. But this also holds the show back from being more. But even with all the critiques, don't let me fool you, this show is still absolutely amazing. And even with the critiques, most of them have to do with the time the show came out, especially when it comes to the editing and the structure, because most shows back then had that type of seasonal structure. This show is a masterclass in character writing that every aspiring writer can learn from. It revolutionized TV and made it the way it is today, and it perfectly balances levity and comedy with dark and complex themes. So my score for The Sopranos overall is well, I can't tell you because then the video won't be as interesting, so I guess you'll have to wait until I finish the Breaking Bad review. So let's get into that. It's the year 2008 and the world, but primarily America, is reeling from the financial crisis. People are pushed to living on shoestring budgets and economic inequalities increased. But once again, the universe must balance out this tragedy by giving us another gem of fiction. Breaking Bad. Oh, Breaking Bad, where do I start with you? This is one of my first real shows I watched as a kid, and it really stuck with me ever since. I mean, first to start off with, the writing is just excellent, just like The Sopranos, but the writing differs in its strengths. Let me explain. As I mentioned, The Sopranos is a lot more of a character-focused show, so the writing in that show has better dialogue and more complex, realistic characters, while Breaking Bad has a better written plot. The story is woven beautifully and constantly has twists and turns and new reveals, being nowhere close to the formulaic nature of The Sopranos season structure. Almost every episode ends in something crazy happening, and whenever big event happens, it's built up throughout the whole season or in that singular episode, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat throughout the whole entire time. But it always felt so rewarding and made me want to keep watching. I wanted to keep watching The Sopranos too, but without the same reasons, honestly not the same excitement. Breaking Bad also has some great character writing as well, with Walter and Jesse having the most well-known character arcs of all time. But pretty much everyone in the show changes by the end, which is in contrast to The Sopranos, because in my opinion, most of the characters don't really change, and that honestly makes sense for that kind of show. It's not a rip on The Sopranos. But Walt's shift from family and teacher man to drug kingpin, or Breaking Bad, you could say, is one of the most iconic arcs in TV history. And Jesse's change to trying to be a good man and be a better person is also a pretty iconic moment in TV history. But even with that point, I would say The Sopranos has better character writing than Breaking Bad. You would think I'd say Breaking Bad since Breaking Bad has character arcs, which is usually a key tenet of good character writing, but no. To me, I think The Sopranos has a lot more relatable characters and dynamics, and I think that's really an important factor when it comes to character writing. I would say it's honestly the most important factor, and that's really because at the end of the day, Breaking Bad is unrealistic. Now look, Breaking Bad has some of the most intelligently written character writing of all time, but I would say because the plot is so, just unrealistic. I mean, Walter goes from a chemistry teacher at a high school, mild-mannered man, to having, tens of millions of dollars in his walls, becoming a drug kingpin within the span of like less than 5 years. I mean, it's a pretty unrealistic show, but the writing still works. But when you compare the two, The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, I would say The Sopranos has better character writing because I can relate to it more. I think that's a very important factor, as I mentioned, to character writing. But both have great Emmy quality character writing, but I think The Sopranos edges out Breaking Bad in this area. Last little point here for Breaking Bad, the cinematography in this show is absolutely beautiful. Some of these desert landscapes when, Walter and Jesse are cooking up meth look absolutely amazing, and there's just more shots I can't really remember, but I know the show is absolutely gorgeous. There are so many shots out in that desert, out in that New Mexico desert, where it just looks so nice and they do so much with it. But yeah, just something I wanted to add on there. So now that we've delved into both shows, let's decide which one is the best. Overall, The Sopranos is a slower based show focused on the characters and studying them over the course of the show. The characters are incredibly complex and real, and that's helped with the amazing dialogue and character writing, and the show draws you in because you want to see how these characters clash and develop. The show runs into some problems though because the show is more character focused. The plot gets slowed down and doesn't help that the show is an old school formulaic season structure, and I think that really kneecaps the potential of the show. There's also the cinematography and editing stuff, but I also think that is mostly due to the times of when the show was made. Breaking Bad, on the other hand, is a more fast-paced show that also has great writing, but as I mentioned before, the writing is more plot-focused. This show is known for the insane deaths and reveals. It's known for the edge-of-your-seat moments rather than the deep character work. And I'm not saying that it lacks that, it's just not its best feature, as like I mentioned, it's not as relatable as The Sopranos. But once again, I can't stress this enough how excellent the plot is for Breaking Bad. Everything in that show builds up so satisfyingly while also keeping you tense, and when the big moments happen, you're left in disbelief and you want to keep watching. It's just so... there's something special about it, man. There's something special, that's all I can say. Also, once again, super underrated cinematography, some of the best around. So now that we've talked about these two great shows, it's time for a decision. And it's a bit multifaceted, so listen up. But before I rate them, let me say this. Breaking Bad would not exist without The Sopranos, because that show laid the groundwork for Breaking Bad. Sopranos walked so Breaking Bad could run because it showed people that an anti-hero or villainous person could be a main character in a TV show, which as I mentioned was almost completely unheard of at that time. And with that, I give Sopranos a 9.5 and Breaking Bad a 10. Yes, I do indeed believe Breaking Bad is a perfect show. Breaking Bad edges out The Sopranos. I already know some people will not be happy about this and others will, but when I think about it objectively, Breaking Bad is just a better show. I think a lot of it has to do with the age of The Sopranos, as some of my main critiques are because of the age, like the bland cinematography, the poor editing, and the age season structure, which I think really did hold it back in the end. Me personally, I like The Sopranos more though. The character work and the slow burn feel along with the comical aspects interest me more. But when thinking about public appeal and objectivity, I must go with Breaking Bad. I like to weirdly think of Breaking Bad as Sopranos V2, as it took a lot of inspiration from The Sopranos because like I said, it wouldn't even exist without it, and then improved upon a lot of the aspects of The Sopranos. I love both shows, but personally, I like The Sopranos more, but I'll have to go with Breaking Bad for this video. Honestly, it's not even fair to compare these shows because they're really so different from each other, as I mentioned in this video, but, for the content, I'll go with Breaking Bad. So yeah guys, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe for more content like this, and yeah, I'll see you guys later. Peace.